Next up, we're talking about modifications to the RGFA Site Plan review for 72 Love Lane. Who's making the presentation on that?
We are Bill Doyle from Doyle Engineering. We'll start off the presentation. But we wanted to introduce some folks before we get too far. All right, let's just get set up here a little bit. You guys up first. So. All right. So, hello all. Nice to see you all again. Bill Doyle from Doyle Engineering, 72 Love Lane. We were before you guys before with the previous owner. What I'd like to introduce is some of the familiar faces you may remember. Dan Quayle, the architect, Cynthia from my office. We have all been on the project since the beginning, since the previous owner. The new faces of the room are Jose, the new owner of the property, and Rick, his builder. We'll just jump right in. We have made changes to basically the size of the building. The size of the house has become smaller. We have not changed the landscape work. And actually, Jade is also here, the landscape architect. She's here for another project. Maybe she'd be here. And she's also graciously, available to answer any questions you may have on the landscape. But the landscape has not changed in the front. This is my site drawing. The landscape plan is exactly as it was before. The big changes to the building, as far as the site goes, is the footprint has become smaller. We've pulled away from the wetlands over here a little bit more. We've changed some of the. This is the old plan. This is the new. We've changed some of the grading here to basically lessen what the grading is. That's against the wetlands. There's no longer a big wall there. This side of the building, the south side of the building, has pulled in a little bit.
How much?
What is the number on that, Cynthia?
How much what?
How much is it
Actually,
pulled
the
in?
feet. Would you know the feet?
Probably 10 feet or so.
It's,
from
yeah,
what it
10.
was before.
It's probably,
We can measure exactly. This is the final. This is the number we're
so it ranges between 5 feet and 25 feet. So here, the wall, this edge here where there's this boulder to demark the 25-foot no touch zone from the wetlands, it's pulled back 5 feet here, and previously the wall went along the
The wall of the building.
The building, well, okay.
How much is the building pulled in?
So basically this length. About 17 feet.
So what happened is the building used to come out to the face here. Now it jogs back,
Right.
and so it comes out there. So it's not. This is back a little bit, and this line here, I believe, is
That's where it was
the
before.
original line.
Right.
So what
Okay,
happens
so it's
is
pulled back in the rear.
So
Yeah.
this is, right, so this is
So
the
the
edge of
area,
the house.
what you see from the street is the same width as what you saw before.
Yeah.
That's right.
Essentially, a
So
little
what is
portion
that?
that's
What
one
is
story
this,
house with an elevation.
It's
Yeah.
a terrace.
So
Right,
Oh, there is a terrace, so there is something going to be there.
right. So this is
Okay.
a 3-foot wall here for the
The
terrace.
house side.
Back. This gets pulled back. This all gets pulled back here.
At the rear.
So this is all gone now. There used to be a deck in that jut
Yeah,
out,
so-
that island.
Yeah.
So that's not there anymore. There's a smaller one here. All of this remains the same.
That's the same on the right hand side.
Right.
Okay, so
So the big differences are this corner pulls in, and the big finger from the back is now gone.
Right.
so the major changes are on the rear.
The rear and yeah. The
The
rear and
major
back.
change is that the house got smaller and
Yeah.
yes, front and here.
Okay.
So the landscape stays generally the same. The building has those changes. The changes are a benefit from wetlands point of view. They approve, they give us the go ahead on that. The drainage system, we didn't change the drainage system, so basically, essentially, the drainage system is oversized for the house now. So that there was no change to the drainage system, but obviously it's small. Those are kind of the major site changes. And I'll let, if there's no questions, or if you want Dan to give his
We'll ask the
presentation.
questions at the end.
Ask the questions at the end. And we'll take this down, put this up somewhere so you guys can take a look at it.
Did you bring a copy of the original that we looked at?
I have the original site plan.
Not the site plan, the building element.
I have a composite of the front elevation of the original and proposed. The overall size, the RGFA, I'll pull it up here in a second. The overall RGFA has gone down just over 1,000 square feet in the original proposal. Obviously, that notch that we were just talking about is back corner, so the perimeter of the house is along here. This piece that sticks out on the end, the study, is only a one-story element. It's not a portion of the two-story. In terms of the front facade, the major components are in generally the same area as the original submittal in terms of the garage being on the north side of the house, main entrance in the center. A little bit more of a two-story roof line with some lower elements. Obviously, the garage is lower than the main
What's
canopy.
the siding?
The siding is clapboard siding.
It was originally shingle, right?
Correct. And there are some stone elements that were on the original that are on this. But again, the overall square footage is down by about 1,700. The RGFA square footage is down by about 1,000. The general materials are clapboard siding, clad windows, asphalt shingles for the roof. There are some stone veneer elements at the main stair tower, at the garage. Some of the site features will be stone. And then as you're going around the back, it obviously essentially a two-story house from the front, but because the way the grade drops off on the back, it becomes a three-story. We've introduced a lower, more horizontal element with some fiber cement siding to try and break up the overall mass on the back side. The garage side facing the north, that's the garage bedroom above the garage. The screen porch, which again is much smaller than the family room that projected out into the back of the property. The south side of the house, this is the office study, which is that one-story piece which projects out the main roof line. That was where that terrace we were talking about off of the family room, and then down to the back and beyond. You're seeing the back side of the side of the screen porch quite a bit farther down. So,
What's the RGFA?
6860.
Does that exclude the basement?
Correct.
Did you have the calculations to prove it's not a story above grade?
I thought we already had dealt with that on the first one, and I know they submitted it for the building inspector. And since he didn't identify that there was a problem, and I assume that it's correct. One of the issues where the previous application, they are actually pushing that because the building came out in the back, and they actually had to fiddle with, and that's why there was some retaining walls and some other issues. They actually had to fiddle with the old plan in order to make sure that it didn't meet that definition of story above grade. And so because this doesn't have that center portion, the building inspector deemed that this easily doesn't meet that definition because the only exposed area is on that rear side.
Right. It's really the front and the two sides of the house are essentially built into the grade. So it's really only along this back edge here that you have full exposure. So when doing the calculation, our calculations said that it was not. The building inspector agreed with that. So that's how we came up with 6860 versus the 7800 that it was originally.
And this is the original approved elevation for the front.
The one that-
both the fronts.
Yeah,
And
this
then
is-
this is the new proposed.
Right. This was the original submittal. It's essentially a site section through to the grade at the front with the planting buffer. The original house, this one here, garage at the end, center, stair tower on the left side. Ours happens to be on the right side. So, and these are
are stacked directly above each other. So you can see even, the roof line for the second story part of it is really no different. If you line up the two-story volume for our new house, it's
I can see
quite a
it's
bit
definitely
shorter.
this way, and for some reason, that original elevation reads as less,
Yeah, less massive.
there you go, that was the word I was looking
Definitely.
for.
And I think it's because the apparent eave line is down at the first floor level.
Right, we're missing, right, this would
That-
be,
that
yeah, that was
helps.
what cut it
It-
down
And I think,
considerably.
I think the siding too, the changing from shingles to clapboards, then they get the symmetry, which always makes a house look less, it always makes a house look more formal and therefore larger.
This looks just oddly truncated somehow or other, I'm not sure
And
why.
the other
That's
thing I
just
want to
me.
look at is the comparison in elevations, because you get a really big two-story wall as you come around the corner on Level
You're talking about the
Lane.
left-hand side?
Yeah.
Yeah,
On the
right.
Well,
left-hand
I
side.
can use the projector and put it on the wall so we can look at both plans. Because
Well,
I have the approved ones on the computer. I can just use the projector to shoot it on the wall.
Well, it's just the two end elevations.
Right.
Yeah. I
It's just
mean,
they don't have that, so
yeah.
if the board wants to
I have a
see it.
feeling that you're getting that first story pent roof coming around the end,
Mhm.
and then you get a much higher gable end. Whereas this way, you're getting the full two-story exposure on that end elevation. Even though you have the little plug at the, single-story plug, but the overwhelming mass is that two-story elevation.
It is, and that goes to the aesthetic that the owner was looking for.
Yeah, but, I mean, our objective, because what's missing here is the house on the right. Because it's coming up.
Right.
And so we need to think about the overall mass of the whole thing as it's finished. And we're trying to keep that mass low. One of the other changes here is that the ridge height and I think maybe this also affects the apparent mass, the ridge height on the lower one is almost 2 feet higher than the ridge height on the upper one.
You're correct, from what?
Really?
Yes.
From what was originally submitted. Now,
Okay.
the allowable, it's.
Yeah, it's
tough to
below
see.
the 30, it's like
It's-
1.5 inches below the 37 feet.
Right, and again, going, with a lot of the shingle-style homes, or a lot of styles of homes, the lower sloping eaves and the built-in dormers and that sort of aesthetic was not something that was particularly interested in. And the two-story, a little bit more traditional mass seemed to be in.
But if you're gonna hit like an inch below the limit, or an inch and a half below the limit, that survey had better be dead nuts on.
Well-
I'm talking about within a fraction of an inch on those contours, because otherwise, if you make the slightest error on the average grade plane,
Right.
you're over the
Right.
the line.
One of the things that, I certainly take that point, and even though we're showing it fairly close to that 37-foot allowable height, what we were trying to do is get the pitch of the roof.
Yeah, no,
as close-
otherwise the pitches start to
Right,
look like a
the ridge
ranch
in the
house.
house and getting the pitches correct.
It's the
with
whole aesthetic. It's the fact that you've got the two-story wall across the front that pushes the ridge height up and increases the mass impression. I mean, I think
Well,
it all goes together.
It does, and it's definitely, this aesthetic, although, the ridge is a little higher than what was
See,
originally.
that's what you saw in the end before. It's not that two-story, the huge two-story elevation. You look at it as almost as a dormer over the lower floor. It's a completely different aesthetic.
Well, here's what the proposed
Yeah.
changes.
Right.
Right. I guess where
And that is a real,
That's a huge difference.
wow.
it is a difference, but they're different style houses. I mean, you've got shingle style to something that's a little bit more traditional in character. I don't think the two, I understand it's different. offend anybody's sensibilities, but we're below. We can certainly have the ridge surveyed as a part of one of the conditions if we feel that that's necessary. I think the one-story element, it's always tough looking at 2D flat drawings. There is play with the stair tower and the massing and the gables on the front. We have included the, bringing the eave line across, so it's not, we carry that horizontal element at the second story eave, so it's not just a complete gable end.
It's like a 5 or 12 pitch too. The pitch
Now, could
changes.
you do something a little different, like, if you've got this blank wall here, could you just do a smaller gable there and just kind of, because that's just really.
That's the other side.
Well, that's the garage side.
I know, I'm just looking at that end, I just think that
The lower one is the comparison with the lower one on the sheet.
that's. Right, but I'm not looking at the upper one. Maybe I'm not.
Well, yeah, I mean, the garage is essentially, is very similar to the original north end. The garage end is very similar with a one-story booth, and then essentially dormers over the 3 garage doors, whether they're shed or gable dormers. That may be the only difference from the original submittal and the one we have now. The south side, the house is not as deep as it was width-wise, which also helped us mitigate some of the roof pitch issues. That low, I agree that the lower line helps to reduce the overall scale, but to start to mix design styles with something that's a little bit more traditional seems to be a little bit of a challenge.
I think you did that on the right side of the front elevation. You lowered that.
You've got a pencil there. What's the
Yeah,
gable?
at the garage, which was similar to what the original submittal was.
I just it's way too massive. It's too massive in my opinion. The impact is much stronger, much stronger.
It's different.
It's strong. It's a much more imposing mass.
Well, it is, but I guess what we're.
Can I talk?
You can talk.
Thank you. I've never been through this process, so I apologize if I'm not following the right rules. So my name is Jose Manuel, the new owner of the house. So my spouse and I bought the lot, and certainly we have a 10-year-old, so we certainly want to be part of the Western community. When we look at the original plans, the house is certainly too massive for what our needs are. We actually work with them. We walk through the neighborhood. We walk through the Love Lane. There's a very diversified group of houses there, so we thought that, what we're trying to do is in keeping with the neighborhood. We have looked at the similar houses in the neighborhood as well. There's houses that, I don't know an architect, but there has a different, what you call it, massing is a new word for me. But so the idea here is that, we also try to keep all the other elements that you have working and proven with the landscape and everything else to kind of like mitigate, any changes. Personally, I feel that, certainly the house is smaller. Certainly some of the elements are different. But, we try to comply with all the bylaws that you have put forward, and certainly hoping to be able to, try to get to some agreement on, how to move forward here.
Thank you. This has been a long process for us. This is like the 6th or 7th meeting on this particular house. There's another one coming down the pipeline that's going to be right next door to you. And
I appreciate that.
we're trying to alleviate the impacts of these 2 houses together. They're on a very prominent corner on the street. And we've worked very hard, as the applicant can tell you, to try and minimize the impacts to the greatest extent that we can. That's what we're still trying to do that.
So I understand that the house was too big for you, but there was no way that you could actually take the existing approved elevations, the existing house, and sort of make it smaller all around? Was there any way to stick with that? Because that's a better looking.
We tried. The house, the way it's designed inside is very close up. It's very formal. So the house here, in terms of the footprint, is a little bit more open to the way we live. So, it was very difficult. And when we started working with them, we ended up basically redesigning the house. So I understand that you've been going through this process for a long time, and I don't, I appreciate your time tonight, and we don't want to be having to go through this process for another 6 or 7 meetings. Certainly, we would like to try to, work with you and minimize that, But again, we tried that. That was our first thought. Unfortunately.
So you did try that initially?
Yeah, it just, because the family rooms
It's
become
not
that
that,
basic
it's the style of the house
Right.
that they're talking about. You could do a smaller shingle style
Right.
house.
But he's talking about having more open spaces inside, and I can understand that.
because
But
the
so
family
that's not the way
rooms.
it works.
So you can't with a single style?
Well, you can take a look at the number of windows. It's the same. It's basically the same amount of light. It's just that it's the way the wrapping is configured.
Mhm.
He wanted a more formal center entrance, double gable, symmetrical house in clapboards. That's that. You could get. It's not about the amount of light you get.
Mhm.
It's about the fact that you want the double gable center entrance is meant to be imposing and massive. That's the aesthetic.
Was that really your
Yeah.
intention?
That wasn't the intention. The intention was that the other house, it has, the gray room was at the end, and then when we tried to cut down the house, we couldn't make the rooms work because we have an office that we very separate, a very huge living room, a very huge dining room, and then the kitchen and the gray room. So we tried to cut the gray room out and try to modify the interior. We ended up redesigning the interior of the house. So the interior of the house, in terms of the rooms, ended up dictating, I guess, the outside of the house.
But you don't want the shingle style look. You want it to be more formal. That's what the architect keeps saying.
We wanted actually simpler, I guess, if you will.
I thought you said you wanted it more informal. Didn't you say that?
That was in terms of the spaces inside. It was more informal.
Right.
Yes.
Right, so that they
But
did more open
the exterior
floor
winds up
plans.
being
Right.
about as formal as you
think,
can get.
yeah, it's a contradiction.
Well, the open floor plan, we spent quite a bit of time trying to get the floor plan to work with their space needs. In terms of the elevation, it is definitely not a shingle style house. And that was a particular design aesthetic that the owners were not terribly interested in. If a shingle style house is going to be built immediately next door, do we have too many of the same styles? I mean, if you look at the street, there's a variety of different styles, many with 2-story eaves, and with a 3-story eave. There's clapboard, there's brick, there's shingle, there's lots of stone on the property. So there's quite a variety on the
So
streets.
these are going to be the only ones on the street that are in the same line together. They're going to be very close together. So they're going to read as essentially one wall when you're finished. Double the width of that, starting, basically where those tall trees are over the right, and just run it that way, and that gives you an idea of the overall mass that you're going to see on those two lots. We can't view this as just standalone because they're going to read together.
There's a house next door to the other house that you're thinking about, and then there's a few houses on, and you probably know the street they're gonna do, but they're kind of like on the road, and
But they're not together like that. And so, especially coming around the corner there on Love Lane, I think it's.
But do you want the houses to maybe be different because you don't want it to be like with one house in a way?
My personal feeling is that because of the 2-story eave line and maintaining that 2nd-story eave line all the way around the end elevation, it's going to look, coming around the corner on Love Lane, it's going to look enormous. And then when you add it to the second house that's going to come later, it's going to be overwhelming.
It's interesting.
That worries me.
We're trying to minimize.
I know, but
that's our intention.
And in
was.
fact, you actually had, made it smaller, but the impact is different from the exterior, the way it looks.
It does look different. There's
Yeah.
no doubt about it.
And the top one, the original one, is just broken up a lot more. It's just, it reads softer and more gentle on the land. The other one, the new one, reads more formal, right?
I mean, I think the intent
Straight.
and outcome are two different things.
Is there any amount of shielding that can be done with this?
No, they've shielded, they've.
Trees, more trees.
I mean, the
right?
plantings,
The plantings,
there's,
fine.
there's a quite
Well,
a buffer along the front.
Can we add a couple of more trees to the property in
No,
the
but there's
front?
very little space. This house is right up, because the whole backyard is wetland. It's the house, and there's not a lot, of septic system in front. I mean, you've got a whole
Right.
bunch of little things that, you know, you really can't put any more plants in as far as I can see. But that said, with the interior that you want, is there any way you can make the exterior
Sure there is.
look a little better?
If the owner's intent is to minimize the impact of the house, then I think that you need to work on having the massing and facade achieve that. You're achieving what he wants inside of the house. I'm not convinced that you're achieving what he wants on the outside of the house.
Well, you know, I'll be honest with you, I like the house the way it looks. So, you know, as we start to design the house and we look at different things, you know, Dan presented to us a few different options. So, you know, it's not Dan's fault. You know, certainly it's, you know.
We're gonna blame him.
We
always blame you.
We're the one who's going to live in the house, you know,
There's
so
a
I want
shingle-style solution.
Oh, there
That's
is.
the same thing. I'll be willing to bet you.
I know there is.
I know.
I've drawn, when it went from the previous owner to Jose, we started with the shingle style
Mhm.
because that's where this house was for that
Right.
parcel. It was more, going through all the iterations in the plan, getting the masses and the volumes of the interior rooms the way they wanted, where the entrance was and the stair and all that. That's where you start your exercise on how to mass it. And most of the options where I brought that roof line back down to the one story, we ended up with a lot more roof aesthetic and a lot of dormers and things like that. And that wasn't something that the client was particularly interested in.
Right.
And that's when the
What's it more formal?
and that's when the EOS went back up to the two-story height.
Those dormers in the roof help break up that whole massive look.
So I don't know what dormers. I'm not, you know.
Well, he was saying that you didn't want the dormers on the roof. You
Well,
know.
they didn't want to live
I'm not,
in the
I'm not
second story.
familiar with the lingo, so just excuse my, you know.
Not an architect,
Yeah,
not a
no,
planning
no,
board.
no,
This is
no,
the planning
no.
board.
Why don't you point out to him that those changes
Well,
and how that massing,
I mean,
visual massing does change with the planes and.
It does. And one of the things, too, is when you're looking at a 2D drawing of an elevation, it isn't flat. I mean, the front
Yeah.
gables are back from the front entrance.
But not a lot.
Well, we do look at a lot of drawings.
Oh,
We have-
I know you guys, I know, but
And some of these people are actually also professional.
I understand.
So-
No, I know, you know, I'm just.
Which,
and it's
so interesting.
Well, the two-story roof line, and perhaps a little bit more traditional, a little less informal, as a shingle style typically is, was not what the owner's desires.
But I'm confused because he said that he wanted a more informal space and his intent was to minimize the impact of the house. And then we end up with a much more formal exterior
Correct.
that's more massive, or at least feels more massive. So it's just not.
It feels more massive. I mean,
Makes sense.
I think
if
that,
you look at the volume is real. The cubic volume is down about 15%. The floor plan area is down about 15%. It's the way the massing reads. If it's the one-story roof line, which I happen to like, which is why our starting point was there, we have some of those one-story elements on the garage, on this, on the.
They're Greystones.
I understand, and it really goes back to the aesthetic, and it seemed in looking at their neighborhood with, there are plenty of houses with two-story eaves. I can certainly appreciate your concern in terms of how you're going to perceive it coming around the
But
corner.
I don't think you can go to precedent here, because these two sites together are, you know, these are special, so, and this has to be right. The answer to this has to be right. I don't want to have to listen to the people in the barber shop telling me for the next 5 years how terrible this is. This has to be the right solution, and I just don't think that's it.
I agree with you, but on the other hand, I'm not living on the other house. I'm paying for this one, so You know, I understand where
You
you're
bought
going
one
from.
where the planning board has site.
No, I
plan.
totally agree, and I respect that, you know, so, so.
This comes with the territory. You didn't buy a house that you could do without any.
So totally agree, and I know exactly what I was, you know. So what, you know, I guess, you know, what are the options here?
Well, I think you need to work on the massing. I think that's my personal feeling. I think it's just way overwhelming.
And if you think that it doesn't present itself well in 2D, then show us a
Build a
3D
model.
rendering or build a model or something.
Is this changing the materials on the side of the house, helping?
The Clivers also make it. So that's also a more formal material.
So what if we change it to shingle side?
Well, then the shingles doesn't work
Doesn't
with
work with
that
that
design
style.
style. You know, you need to just, I think it's a trip back to the drawing board to look at reducing the massiveness, the apparent massiveness of the house.
But we'd also have to think about the color of the clapboards.
Yeah.
I don't know what you were thinking. Were they
it's
white or were
white.
they
I think it's white.
darker? or-
This is Tara. It is.
Oh, we don't have huge two-story
Oh, you don't have comp, no, you have
Yeah,
one story.
you have
column.
double doors though.
Yeah, you do.
Tar is a reference to Gone with the Wind movie. It's not
So
actually a
you're
book.
going over my head. So
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry,
It's a different
late at night,
reference. not-
pretty much everybody's
it's not
punching
worth-
here
not
at this
worth it.
page. However, you have heard,
Yeah.
we can say that 20 different ways, each one of us.
Yep, that's where we are.
So if they bring that small roof over the first story across, does that help at least in part of that massing? You still have the.
I don't want to
the
design
left
it.
side.
I think that's, you know, if you come back to us, I'm sorry, David, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
That's all
I
right.
just think we shouldn't get into the design business. Our feeling, and I think it's a consistent feeling across the board, is that the massing needs to be softened.
So I guess.
And I would lower that ridge absolutely back to the original ridge height, no question about it. You know, it's that extra 2 feet makes a difference.
So I think we've clearly heard what you guys would like to see. The owners obviously need to think about how they might be able to accommodate that. I guess the question becomes, if they feel that this is the style house that we want, are we at an impasse? And if we're at an impasse,
We're not. Maybe you are, but we're saying, I'm saying, and I don't know if the other board members agree with me, but you know, you're an inch and a half below the seal, the 37-foot ridge height, whereas before you were 2 feet below it. I think that makes a huge difference. So I would take the ridge height back down to where it was before and break up the massing so that it's not as imposing. I don't know why that leaves us at an impasse.
well, it leaves it potentially, I'm not saying we are at an impasse, I said the potential for an impasse is that if the owners decide that's not the style of house that they want, then
You can do a classical, this is essentially a classical revival house, sort of modernized and spruced up, but that's what it is. You can do one that's not 37 feet high and not as massive as this. I mean, they're all over New England.
and is that something that you might be more amenable to even if it wasn't shingle style?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that it's possible to break up you don't need to have the 2-story block all the way around. You can break it up. There are ways to work with the classic revival style that's not as solid as this appears to be. It's just a matter of taking another look at it and seeing if you can get. If you're insisting on that style, then see if you can make that work with less imposing a building with the kind of apparent mass this one has.
And dropping that ridge line down to where it was with the ridge
And it gives you a challenge with respect to the gable pitches, especially the end elevation.
I know.
It starts to look like a huge ranch house.
Right.
I mean, I get it, but it's not necessarily the case. It's possible, it's possible to do it.
Oh, I do. I mean, we have another half dozen versions that got ruled out before we got to this point. A lot of them are the one-story spring point for the roof, not necessarily a horizontal element with the roof overhang, but treated so the appearance was different, but that's not where the owner seemed to want to end up. So that's the challenge.
Maybe it's a matter of going back and seeing if it's not possible, but it's not the only house in the world. There are other ways to do that house. It's not the only design that's possible.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
We've gone through a lot of trace to get to this point.
And if it's not what you want, then again, and I don't mean to be harsh about it, but maybe you shouldn't have bought a house or a lot where the town had an input in the outcome.
I think that, I'm standing here for the same reason that you guys have jurisdiction over Long Lane. It's a beautiful street, so, it's a place that I just want to basically have my daughter to grow and be able to be part of the community.
No,
so
we're glad to have you.
So I guess, I don't know anything about the process, and I apologize, but is there a way that, some kind of, let's say partial approval is granted in the sense that, the footprint of the house itself,
Well, I don't know if you want to.
is not going to change.
You want to lock yourself into the footprint?
Well,
You might actually get more flexibility if you didn't lock yourself into the footprint.
I don't think locking ourselves into the footprint is going to do us any good right now.
Yeah, that's
To
what
be
I thought.
perfectly honest with you. I mean, here's where we're at. We need to get through this process as efficiently as we can, where all parties are happy. We're obviously
No,
Not-
we do it that everybody's slightly unhappy. Us and you,
Well, I think
but
we're
that's how
probably here right now.
we come to an agreement. I want to say that we are not completely immutable, but we need to see a little movement.
right. Point taken. I guess it is smaller. There are a lot of things that have reduced the impact, and to look at it in 2D, given the 85-foot setback from the street and the buffer and the way the grade goes up, I don't see the two-story line as being problematic. We can go back and discuss how we want to try and reformulate this particular house.
What I don't want to do is you're going to be continued to September. Right now. You want to be continued to November?
No.
Well, I mean, this is where we are. I mean, you're coming up on the end of the, and I'm sure Joe has discussed this with you. I hope he has, because I told him this was going to be the situation at the meeting tonight. So I'm sure
You
he's.
mean as far as the board's schedule?
Yeah, the board's reaction to this, and the fact that the schedule,
Yeah, 'cause
here it is.
One of the things is they wanted to present their argument to you on why they support this.
Yeah, but I
so-
told you that.
Yep,
this
and I relayed all your
okay,
comments.
That this was going to.
Is there an alternative to maybe, just, let's say, changing the color of the house and maybe more of a, I don't know, gray tone or something, that it doesn't read as
We're not going to
bland?
take it the way it is right now.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, no, I think it's.
I mean, for us to wait until September,
It's a
it's
massive
like,
problem.
it's going to be a shame, and, certainly it's
Well, that's why I said
it's
to Joe.
probably,
You were late in the application.
question that if I even,
I know,
For
I
now,
told
yeah,
Joe
with the
that
big change.
this is exactly what we did. I
Yes.
didn't want to get into tonight. Is exactly this discussion. That's why I told Joe, tell him that this is going to, that you're going to hit a wall on this. this is the nature of the wall, so
Well, there may be,
Well,
there may be an alternative in that, because the upper one is the old one that has been approved, that could be built. Now, if the interior, there's some changes that will work for you, then that's a lot easier to work with.
If you're in a hurry.
Yeah, if
If
you're
you're
in a
not
hurry.
in a hurry, yeah.
You could open up the interior spaces.
we're not gonna back off on it. And
No, I understand that.
And we're not
I
going to
just-
tell you where your interior spaces are, it's not
No.
our job.
No, and, in reading the bylaws in terms of being conscious of the character of the neighborhood and things like that, I mean, we're under the allowables for the height.
Are you actually going to try to
No,
talk us into?
No, I'm not trying to.
What are you trying to get out of the conversation at this point? Because we've been very clear about what it is that we're looking for, and we're going to have to continue the hearing.
If there's some reconsideration to try and modify some of what's been approved, is it conceivable to get that moving earlier than September?
I don't know what you mean.
Depends what,
I mean, rather, if they're willing to go back to a house more similar to what was approved, consider reconfiguring the inside in a way that they're happy with, is that still going to hit that same wall that puts it to September, or is there a
We have
possibility?
2 more meetings
Right, would be possible
scheduled
to be
before the
heard
summer break.
in one of those meetings?
They're full. They're totally full right
we
now.
don't deal with the inside.
We don't. I know.
I mean, what you do with the inside is,
Well, if all we want to do is make it essentially smaller, is that something that can be done administrative rather than through a
No.
hearing? So no matter what is done at this point, we're tabled to
That's why I
September.
was telling Joe, don't tell him not to come in. To give him the word that they're going to hit a wall. Come in later, but or
Well, I think it's important for us to hear what the concern is, because again,
okay. Well, here
client
it
says
is.
need, you have, the board has a desire.
David had an interesting comment.
right, I mean, what you do with the inside, we're not going, we don't have a ruling on that.
I understand.
So you can make the inside work, and you can build, you can start what's approved already,
Right.
as soon as you're ready.
So first, just for my own consideration, so there's a whole gray room that sticks out into the, if you decide to build a house without that, do we have to come back to get a?
Well, you've already got it designed in shingle style.
No, but if we want to take the shingle style design, just make it a little smaller, because they don't want a house
Yeah,
that
he's already
big.
drawn it. He's done one in that style,
Right, but
in that size.
but do we need
Smaller
to,
size.
But,
Yeah,
no,
well,
but he wants
You
it
haven't seen
smaller.
it.
You have seen it?
We haven't. No.
So that it wasn't something.
Right.
He wanted. The owner wanted to do.
We need to
We
work
don't
with
want
you folks, but I'm really.
I'm just trying to
Right, and
figure out under what scenario we're not tabled till September.
So
if
they're
there is
asking,
one.
yeah, could they shrink
Can we
that
shrink the?
design?
They've already
Do
done
it.
it apparently. In some one point.
We have to approve
Yes.
it.
We still have to approve it.
Which one are we talking about?
No,
Well,
can we build the approved design smaller, or does that require coming back?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I don't know what it means. What does it look like?
That's what I'm trying to.
And then you were saying you were going to take off like a
something
lady back or
let's say
something
something
like
like
that.
this, you still have to come approve it, but I'm thinking, is that more suitable for what you guys are looking for? I'm saying that it has to be.
It helps. It's not necessarily there yet, but it's getting there. Can we meet with them?
Yeah.
Do we have time available either next week or the week after?
Yeah.
Why don't we meet them on July the 2nd?
Okay, I was actually going to ask, is there on the 25th the opportunity, just for a gut check, say, look, here's the direction, here's like 2 options. Does this address the concern so that then they can finalize things for the 2nd?
Okay.
Those
How full is our
levels,
schedule next week? I mean,
we only have 2 items.
Oh, good, okay, so we have time.
Yeah, it's
We're
just,
good.
realistically, it's not until 9:30 at night,
Yeah,
so.
that's fine. Let's do this.
This is the special planning board meeting that we
Yeah,
promised
it
me
was only
right
gonna be
before
one
our
item.
wedding.
And it's now up to 3.
A wedding at my house, fabulous, so this was
They don't get your mind off things.
Swore up and down. It was only gonna be
It was
that.
sworn up and down that we would just do one thing so that we could get out of here, but it always happens
Now we're up
every
to 3,
June.
actually.
Every June.
I really appreciate that, very much.
Selected them too.
Oh, who cares? Go do that absentee ballot. Don't get at me, Susan, I'm not in the mood. All right.
Okay, so we'll
We'll see you next
we'll
Tuesday.
make a special point of this, because we weren't supposed to meet next week. It's a special meeting, we were only supposed to look at one thing next week, but we'll make a special case and take a look. But I can't guarantee that we're going to sign off on it.
But
Okay?
Yeah, that's
I totally appreciate that.
So, if you look at those, the top one looks more sort of rural, country house.
Informal.
And the one on the bottom looks much more like a suburban house. You like what you like, and that's, your choice, of course. But, so if you maybe view these slightly differently in terms of what the difference in those styles are. Because that bottom one's definitely much more formal, much more sort of,
Drive around.
yeah, I don't know how to spell it, but,
Okay, I'll certainly, next
Thank
meeting, I appreciate your time.
10:25.
Thank you.
Night,
What,
thanks
what,
for
what
listening to
time do you
us.
have to be here?
No, I'm just looking at the time now.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to us.